Cool. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to UX Insiders. For anybody that's joining for the first time, my name's Rachel, and I'm a researcher here at the UX Design Institute. So hopefully many of you know already, but at the UX Design Institute, we offer a range of online courses for people looking to launch a career in UX design. So related to that, we have UX Insiders, which is the event we have this evening. And that's a series of live events hosted by us. And each event, we are lucky enough to be joined by some of the most interesting and creative people in the field of UX. So the idea behind these events really is to give some insight into what it's actually like to work in the UX industry. And to do that, we speak to some of the best people working in UX right now. So today, we're very lucky to be joined by Sean Conlon, who is a product designer with ASOS. So thank you for joining us, Sean. So yeah, we're especially proud to be able to say that Sean is actually a graduate of our own course, our professional diploma in UX design. So today, Sean is going to tell us all about his career progression from being a student to where he is now, which is specialising in the UX of fashion. So before we officially begin, I just want to mention that there will be lots of time for Q&A throughout the event. So for anybody that's tuning in, if you wouldn't mind typing your questions into the questions panel. And if you see a question that you'd really like to hear the answer to in particular, if you can upvote it, that would be really helpful. Just lets us know that it's a question others are interested in hearing the answer to as well. So that's everything from me. Sean, you're very welcome to UX Insiders. We're really happy to have you take part.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Hello, everyone.
So yeah, I guess maybe to start off, I'm sure most, if not everybody listening, knows all about ASOS. But maybe to start off, you could just tell us a little bit about ASOS, what it is, what you guys do.
Yeah, for sure. So ASOS is the online destination for fashion-loving 20-somethings all over the world. We operate in over 200 different markets in about 10 different languages. And we have over 24 million active customers, which is a big set of customers.
Yeah.
Online fashion store, like I said, and I think two big kind of reasons which set ASOS apart, I believe, is I think if you chat to anyone about ASOS, everyone kind of says, oh, you can get anything on ASOS when it comes to fashion. So yeah, and that's true. That's not without any reason. There's over 900 global brands on ASOS across different like clothing and also beauty with face and body. And we have our own ASOS brands as well. So that includes like ASOS Design. And in the last few years, we've recently acquired Topshop Top Man, which is another iconic brand in the UK and Ireland and abroad. So yeah, you can literally find anything on ASOS. But also as well, I think another reason which has kind of led to the success of ASOS is just that frictionless experience. Again, if you chat to anyone about ASOS, I think people mention that even though it's online only, we don't have any brick and mortar stores. It makes the experience, if you buy something online, doesn't quite fit or anything like that, the returns experience is really easy. We have very accessible and relevant global payment methods for people across the world. So yeah, I suppose that sums up ASOS in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, you're speaking to a loyal ASOS. So I was particularly excited for this one. So that's great, Sean. Thanks for that introduction. I guess I'm going to go back a bit now and just ask you a bit about your own background. So I know you originally didn't study UX. You originally studied, was it business information systems?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe you could just give us a little bit of an overview of your journey really from there to how you became interested in UX.
Yeah, for sure. So I studied business information systems, like you said, in University College Cork. Again, like a lot of I suppose people in secondary school, they're not sure what you wanted to do. That was me. I was definitely one of those people who wasn't sure what they wanted to do. For a long time. I think my CAO application was a very pick and mix bag of different courses. And yeah, I think I just tried to bring it back to kind of what I was interested in. And I think the main thing was technology. Was always interested in tech from a very young age. But also people. I had psychology down in my CAO, so I was interested in people as well, and also like solving business problems, even though I never actually studied business up until at that point. But I also really was interested in the idea of developing an app. I think before I walked into BIS, I was like, okay, I want to make an app, and did that. Yes, eventually. So there was lots of development work, which was really cool. And I especially really liked the UI side of things, so designing the actual applications. If there was any group project, I was always like straight in to the UI side of things. So that's kind of BIS, I think. And then during that, I also did an internship here in London as well. So I'm based here in London, ASOS office, but I also was in an internship in 2019 for 6 months with Barclays. So they are a big corporate UK and retail bank here, and it was just a general like tech internship. Again, didn't know what I wanted to do still at that stage when it came to a career then. But my goal with Barclays was just to find a career that really interested me. So I took that time to like meet a bunch of different people across the company. And then I was getting into a bit of a slump, thinking, just none of these careers sounded any way interesting. They either sounded too technical, not technical enough. And then I stumbled across some UX designers, and it just like a light bulb moment. I didn't even know you could be a designer of any software, which was really cool for me to discover that. And then I think from there it was okay. Now I know my target. I want to do that. So I went back to Cork to finish out college, and researched how to get into UX. YouTube was my biggest friend at that time. And just really watched a load of YouTube channels and figuring out how could I get into it. I did a few modules. BIS actually had some interaction design modules, which was great. So I went from there. And then again, COVID hit in my final year of college. And again, I wasn't sure how I could get into UX. I think I applied for a master's, but then I just realized I just wanted to start working. I didn't want to do more education. And then during that time when I was researching how to get into UX, I built up my portfolio, and we actually developed an app in my final year of BIS, and I just used that as kind of a portfolio project, and sent it around to different lecturers in college, and it actually got into the hands of the co-founder and CTO of WorkVivo, Joe Lennon, and it all kicked off from there. So that's how we got from an interest to actually start working.
No, that's great, and thank you for that overview, because it kind of helps. Now I have lots of questions I can ask. Really good just to start off with a kind of a picture of you and what your journey's been like, so thank you for that. I know you mentioned that kind of light bulb moment when you found UX. I mentioned at the start that I'm a researcher, so I talk to people all the time about how they found out about UX. And so often people talk about this light bulb moment, that it was kind of the thing that they were looking for almost. So I guess I'm just wondering, what was it about UX that made it that light bulb moment for you, or what appealed to you? I know you mentioned kind of the interest in tech and potential psychology, and some people talk about it being like that nice balance, but I guess I'm wondering, what was it for you that kind of made you say that's the one for me?
I think I was initially drawn in by the UI side of things. For the longest time, I thought product design and UX UI design was all about the creative side of things. Hence, we have the term designer in your title. So I think that was it. I was drawn in by the UI side of things. So that was kind of that light bulb moment when you could be creative. Because I was always a bit creative from a young age. From playing with Lego when I was very young, and then working on Microsoft Paint when I was even young as well. And then I just always had that affinity for technology as well. I was always watching like the latest kind of iPhone releases and things like that on YouTube and stuff. So there was that side of it as well, the tech side of things. And then as to how it appealed to me more and more was when I learned more about UX and the kind of deeper meaning behind the UI, that it's not just making things look pretty, that it's about crafting that experience for people and solving problems. And I think that's the true sense of creativity and the design in your title is being creative with a stronger purpose. And I just found that was really rewarding and fulfilling. So when I met designers in Barclays, that's what I could feel, that energy from them, is that they just felt that it was a really fulfilling career, and I could just tell that they were happy in what they were doing, and that's all I wanted, really. But then, there was the kind of practical side of things as well, like the ability to, as I learned more about UX, to work in a range of industries and markets, and really exciting industries, just like fashion. And then also just like more practical side as well, like good salaries and like a good sense of career progression. So all these things kind of led me to where I am.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's great. And, it's really interesting to have somebody like you who was studying something different at the time that you kind of stumbled upon UX. Because something I was going to ask you was just a bit about any advice you might have for someone maybe who's studying or working in a non-design field or role. And, if that person is thinking about making a move towards UX or product design, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Yeah. I think learning the craft, and it's an obvious one, and preaching to the choir here when I say that, but and find a way that suits you in terms of learning. For me, I'm not a big reader. I don't like reading books. I try, but YouTube was, again, like I said earlier, is how I learned to design a lot of it, but also just reading online articles too. And I think just learning the craft, and then researching, is there any accessible courses that you could do on the side? So there's that side of things. But besides that as well, I think another thing a lot of people say is like, look at your transferable skills. You might not be currently working in business or in tech at all. In WorkVivo, my last company, one of the designers there, she worked as a midwife. Which is complete different change. But I think what made her such a fantastic designer is her empathy. She had great empathy and understanding of UX. And I think, I presume her time as a midwife definitely helped with that. And there's lots of people here in ASOS as well that come from different backgrounds. So there's no one in here, a designer that I've met, doesn't have a story about how they got into design. So it can be done.
Okay. Brilliant. And I know I mentioned at the start that you're actually one of our graduates of one of our courses. So I guess I'm just wondering, maybe you could talk a little bit about where taking a course in UX kind of fit in your journey, and why did you decide to take the professional diploma in UX design? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that decision.
Yeah. So for me, like I said, I did like 2 modules in college in interaction design, and I had the portfolio work, but I just felt that like my biggest pain point was that I didn't have like formal education in design. So at that point I was like working in WorkVivo at the time. I was the first design hire in there at this early stage startup, and I just felt like I wanted to learn more, but also have that like accreditation to my name and that legitimacy to my name. So I researched around, and then I saw UX Design Institute, and I was eyeing it up for a long time. I thought it just looked really appealing, and it just suited me. I'm going to be plugging a lot of benefits here for me, but I just found that like things like the university accreditation, and learning in your own time for me as well. It was during COVID, like you can imagine. I you couldn't go in person, so that was another big thing as well. I was all online, which was fantastic. So learning in your own time, and then that thing of building up your portfolio again, because again, before that I only had like a college example. So yeah, and then I just asked around on LinkedIn. I could like just kind of stalk people on LinkedIn who had done the course as well, and I just reached out to them and asked them for their advice and what they thought about it, and everyone had great things to say. So I ended up doing it. So yeah.
Okay, so you were actually, from what you've said, you were actually in a role. You had kind of gotten a job in UX design when you decided, and it sounds like it was kind of about giving you that confidence, or the kind of like stamp of approval almost, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I know there's a couple of questions coming in on portfolio and you know, landing the job in ASOS, and I know people are eager to hear about what it's like working in ASOS. So before we talk about your role in ASOS at the moment, maybe you could, talk to us a little bit about any tips you could share from your own portfolio or the interview process. That would be great.
For sure, yeah. So the process for interviewing ASOS, I thought was definitely, from what I've heard about other people who've been in interview processes and then other ones I also was in at the time, it was definitely one of the easier ones. At the first round was like a phone call with the recruiter, like a general one that usually is just asking me what I'm interested in and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then the second round was just walking through a portfolio case study, pretty standard. And then the third one, I got given a take-home assignment. That's since been changed to a whiteboard challenge. So we recently changed that to kind of make it a bit more accessible, because the take-home assignment, it could take you a long time to do. I got given a week to do it, and you want to give it your all. So it's not fair for other people who might have kids and stuff like that. So we changed that recently. But I can actually maybe like walk through my portfolio and show you the one that I had at the time. I've slightly updated it, but nothing mad, if that would help people a little bit.
Yeah, that would be brilliant if you don't mind.
My screen. And let me do this window. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I had tried to understand, like, how could I build an online portfolio? So again, I did, whenever I want to learn something, I went to YouTube, but I also researched and looked at other people's portfolios. And I think for me, I kept looking up as people like building their own portfolios. I had experience as a developer, so I tried doing that, but God, it took me way too long. So I just realized there's no point in building it out. Like, what's the real value of a portfolio? It's to show your work as a designer, not a developer. There are some amazing portfolios out there, and I'm not saying that that's not what you should do. I definitely would love to do that at some stage in my career, have like a really nice, cool custom portfolio. But I kind of looked at what tools I was comfortable with at the time, and Notion is what I use. So it is just a content writing tool that you can use for literally anything. I use it on a daily basis to track my to-do lists, my projects, things like that. So with it, I just started to play around with the different things you could do with Notion, and this is my kind of landing page that I had at the time. And yeah, like, it's pretty bog standard in terms of like, it's nothing amazing in terms of like making things wow and flashy. I tried to add in some like different design elements and try keeping a consistent color and branding throughout with like the purple. But yeah, it just kind of showcases my who I am and my work, most importantly, so allowing people to dive straight in. And I had like these two examples here from WorkVivo. I had one like long case study if people have more time, and then I had like more of a quicker read. Arguably there's only 8 minutes in the difference, but yeah. And then within that, then I have just the typical, I won't go through this entirely, but I just researched like how to structure a case study. And it's basically following the design process and talking about the problem, goals, research. What else is in here? So yeah, as you can see, it's at Conlon.design if anyone wants to take a look. Some quant research. Yeah. So just telling the story of how I got from that problem to developing out the solution. Mm-hmm. So that's the work. So again, that's most important. Again, I wanted to spend time less developing and making a killer portfolio and more on the content and focus on that. So that's the work side of things. I think the other elements that really help with this portfolio is things like the kind of social proofing aspect. So as you can see, I have ASOS and WorkVivo as my design companies. I had previously worked at Barclays, like I said. I also did a little call center stint in Airbnb. Might be cheeky putting this logo on my portfolio, but it's definitely eye-catching nonetheless. But yeah, these are the companies I've worked for in the past. And then what have people said about me? Some end-of-year performance, people that have mentored me, people I've previously spoke for at events, and other people that I've mentored. And then another thing I think is missing in a lot of portfolios is just showing a bit of personality. So for me, I think 3 words that sum me up is design, music, and travel. And I have a little longer section. And I also have a bit of a weird section here, but gas UX, which is just showing how design can be a bit funny at times.
Yeah.
So that's my online one.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think I agree with you. Like, showing a bit of your personality is always a nice idea. Like, a question we get a lot is, how do you make your portfolio stand out against the rest? So I think you've done that really nicely. I think as well what you've said about using Notion is really interesting, because I certainly know, with some of our students, that can be a question that comes up as well, how to build the portfolio online and make it shareable. And I do think people can get maybe a little bit bogged down if they're not from a developer background in trying to build a very technically complicated portfolio. But I guess what's nice here is you've kind of shown that you can get the job with a portfolio in a format that you were comfortable with, because you could make it look great.
Yes, exactly. I think that was definitely it definitely took a lot of the stress out of my and the anxiety of trying to build a portfolio, because like I haven't updated it since, and I it's just painful. But I think if I was to update it today, it would just be adding a new page here, and off I go. So it's a bit more sustainable too. The other thing as well in the interview, what I did was, I think what really annoys me if I've interviewed designers in the past and they just walk through this kind of format in an interview. I think this is a very poor decision to do, because this is designed to be consumed by the recruiter or by other designers to read through and trying to show your process. When you're in an interview, I think it's all about thinking of the experience of the other person at the end of the call. And I think a deck is a lot better format for you. So I had this deck as well when I had that second round interview. I talked through a different project than the other ones that I had online. Again, it's just showing that they might have already read these 2. They might have only read 1, but I'm showing them another side to me and how I tackle other problems too. And then the other 2 things, which I think were important, and I think my manager, when I got hired, said that this is what kind of he remembered me by, is the about me section. So I talked a bit about me. I wasn't like I went into that interview and landed straight into event live streams here. I give it a bit of an intro to who I was, my education, my work, and like what I'm interested in. And fashion was an important area there. And then finally, another thing I thought was great, and this is accredited to Femke, who's a product designer on YouTube, that final pitch. So you've walked through who you are, you walked through your work. How are you going to do that final pitch? And I talk a bit about what sets me apart and how I'm continuously improving as a designer. So there's some other tips I have as well around like offline portfolios is just as more important as the online ones. The online ones get your foot in the door, and once your foot's in the door, you better open it with a good offline portfolio too.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think what you've said is really important about the format for an interview maybe being different to how you format your online portfolio, because it's a different way of consuming it, like you said. That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. So I have a couple of questions here from some of the people watching. So one question we have is, would a background in fashion design help in working in the UX of fashion or e-commerce?
Yeah, definitely. I think we recently got an overview from the kind of process around how fashion is designed here in ASOS, and their process is actually quite similar to what a UX or product designer is. I think if you're applying for an associate designer role, there is a lot of leeway given to you to show how you think and how you solve problems, and maybe not necessarily how you solve a product design process. So I think you definitely could pivot in that way. And if you show how, I think one thing that would help is how maybe technology helped you in that fashion process. So yeah, I'm not sure if that person is a fashion designer or is just working in design. I think if you are wanting to go to a company like ASOS, it definitely helps. One of the designers here has product designers has a good, very big interest in fashion, and that was one of the things she showcased in her interview too. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I know from speaking to some of our students and graduates myself, fashion is a background that comes up a lot. There's definitely, I think, crossover skills between fashion designers and UX designers. So yeah. Okay, great. And I have another question here. So this is from somebody who is trying to finalize their portfolio at the moment. And they're wondering, do you have any tips on how to write a good use case? And what would a good use case look like according to your experience?
When writing my use case, I think there are a few elements at play to kind of write it in a good way. Again, as a product designer, if you just again think about who's the person reading it at the other end of the screen, and what are their intentions, what do they want to know when reading a good use case. They don't want to read reams and reams of pages, which arguably mine might have been too long. But I think it's all around showing a few things, your process, be very, very clear on your process and how you tackle a problem. Be very clear on a few things like your roles, be clear on what you have worked on versus where you've collaborated equally. And one thing that when I was constructing my portfolio is be very clear on the work that you did and the work that you did as a team, but don't be afraid to show that, don't say everything was done by the team. Be very clear on what you have done and the impact you've brought. And the other thing I think is very important is showcasing the impact you've made as a designer. If you've constructed a beautiful portfolio use case or case study, and you don't show how you went about going to the effort of finding that problem, fixing that problem with your design, and you don't say like what improvement you made at the end of the day, then it just shows that there's been no impact by the work that you've done. So definitely show that piece is definitely the kind of final punch in a killer portfolio.
Okay, so not to forget that final step. Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. And is that just to make sure that everybody understands that one? Because I know it's an important one. Is that kind of, just showing that final bit of how your design impacted the end user, that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. Whether that is a lot, if you work in, like, for example, here in ASOS, we have a lot of product metrics. So if you've made any improvement to any metrics, that's the main one. But if you work in a company where you don't have established product metrics and KPIs, I think there are other ways too, whether that be running more testing and showing qualitative feedback by users saying this has been amazing to me, or how you've maybe in a B2B, like a business to business space where it was critical for a new product launch or a new customer signing. There are other ways as well if you don't have those metrics. Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, great. I guess what I'm really hearing from what you're saying is, being a good storyteller.
Yeah.
Part of that is not forgetting the end of the story.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really, really good advice. Thank you for that. I know we're kind of jumping around a bit with the questions, but I think you mentioned the metrics and KPIs there, so I'm gonna jump into that for a second because we actually have a question from a viewer here about which metrics or KPIs you find particularly useful in your job. I don't know if you could maybe speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So at ASOS, we have an established insights and analytics team, and they are crucial to the work we do. we'd be running around like headless chickens if we were just making changes and not knowing the impact they make. So again, it's coming back to that impact piece. In terms of the work I do, so I currently work in the checkout, payments, and identity space. So for that, I think the main one, it's an obvious one that people work. If you're working in checkout in any e-commerce experience, it's about conversion and that unique buying visitor percentage. So yeah, if you can change the dial in that in any way, if you can make more people purchase your products, and if you can make that experience of going through checkout as easy as possible, then that's the kind of main metric we use. We also monitor other metrics, but the main one is that conversion one for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, brilliant. So yeah, I guess that kind of brings us on nicely to just ask, the kind of central question, I guess, about what a typical day looks like as a product designer at ASOS. Maybe you could tell us a bit about the kinds of projects you work on, what you do on a typical day.
Yeah, for sure. So whenever I see those day in the life videos of a product designer on TikTok, I think they're very misleading, even though I did one for ASOS, because no 2 days are the same. And I think a lot of those TikTok videos are full of people eating half the time, which is important, but I think it's more interesting to understand the work that you do. So I think a typical day is very varied. I know that's very cliche that no 2 days are the same, but it's very varied. So it depends a lot on the projects that I have at the moment. So I typically have maybe like 2 or 3 projects on at the go at the same time. So these are 2 or 3 different distinct features that I'm working on. And I think the reason why it's so varied, and which is a good reason why I love being a designer, is the variedness of it. It depends on what stage of the design process that project's at. So if I'm working on a project that's just kicking off, I will be spending a lot of my time understanding the problem space, working a lot with the PM to understand, why are we going after this in the first place, doing a lot of early stage research, like competitor analysis. And then I could be doing that in the morning, but in the evening, I could be doing some UI designs or actually testing the designs with real customers, if it's more on the build side of the process. So yeah, that's the kind of project side of things. And other things that I think are super important is that I'm constantly on Teams and communicating with other designers and product managers. And then today I'm in the office here in ASOS, our office here in Camden. And yeah, those days are typically very meeting heavy, I think. And yeah, other things that I could be working on include building larger workshops. So I actually was doing that today. I was prepping for a workshop we're doing tomorrow, or training other people and designers. So last week I was doing some Figma training with developers, and learning and educating them more about how we use Figma and how they can use Figma to collaborate with us, which has been fun. So yeah, that's the typical day. And I suppose projects, like I said, I on the checkout and payments and identity space, and those kind of projects can come from an array of places. I'm unfortunately not able to share them at the moment, but I think where they come from could be where either I've contributed to supporting the roadmap through generative research that I've done, maybe directly from customer issues, from customer care data that we've looked at. There might also be a new payment partner we want to launch with. Yeah, that could be anything really. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. That's great. I'm sure there'll be a couple of questions that come through now from some of the people watching at home. But just a couple of questions I have just out of interest. So, yeah, I know you mentioned working with software developers, and yeah, I'm interested in that, just in terms of the collaboration. Something that we hear about sometimes is, potentially a little bit of a breakdown of communication. It's really nice to hear that you have such a collaboration working together in Figma. I'm just wondering, how that works or how you find that, is it helpful? Do you think those strong relationships with developers are important?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think I've really learned that craft in WorkVivo as well as here in ASOS, where, well, first of all, I did some work as a developer. So in WorkVivo, I was working kind of on front-end development bits, and then I did some accessibility stuff. And then I quickly figured out my brain can't handle being a developer, and I wanted to get into design. So I think I had that kind of, I could speak developer language mostly, a little bit. Definitely not everything. I don't know anything or everything about it. So I think that helps. But again, if you're a designer who doesn't have that background, which a lot of designers are, I think it all comes down to communication and understanding like how you like collaborate, how you like to prefer to communicate with each other. And you don't have to like explicitly ask a developer, how do you like to communicate? You definitely can. I think that's probably a good idea, but you can kind of tell from the way they communicate to you. Do they like to hop on calls? Do they like to message you on Slack a lot in Teams? So I think there's that element. So it's the more human side of things, which I think remains unspoken about, instead of people talking a lot around like how to do a nice, clear design handoff page. I think that's definitely really important. But I think there's that human element of just understanding one another, and getting them in as early as you can. I hate that process of like, you're the designer and you go to the developer, hey, build this. That never works well. Never. I've been there, and it's just always led to a breakdown in communication. People are aggravated at each other. You're not seeing where the other one is coming from. So if you can get a developer involved as early as you can bring them along the design journey and get their input as early as you can. Yeah, they're the kind of things I've learned over the last while. A lot of it is probably people might already know, but there's definitely some things. Yeah.
No, it's great stuff. No, I'm just interested because we actually have a course that we do in it's software and coding fundamentals, but it's built basically to help people speak the language of developers. So I guess that's kind of, it's definitely something we've kind of heard people struggle with. So I'm interested in that in particular. So I have a question here from somebody asking, do you find as a team you work on one product at a time, or could you be working on multiple projects, each with their own kind of design cycles? And design cycles is something I want to ask you about in detail next. So I guess maybe the two are tied in together.
So, I think the reality of being a designer is you don't follow every single step in the design process, as much as that's kind of like you're told about that. You might have a limited number of designers in any company. You might have a limited amount of time to get something out the door. So you need to be a bit smart and kind of, unfortunately, cut corners. But there are definitely, like, I would say, non-negotiables within the design process. But in terms of the different features, how they come about, I think in ASOS so far, I've been here since April of this year, and I've been primarily working within checkout and within the identity pages. So when I say identity, I'm on about the login and registration pages. I'm solely kind of in there, but there are some designers that might work across other areas. We try and, work on a feature at a time, but also understanding if you have multiple features on the go, that how they interact and impact each other. If you work on something in isolation, you might fail to see the bigger picture. So it's all about like thinking broad, but then kind of designing and building in a narrow sense as well. And then the design process, I think you were saying, and like the iterativeness of it, is that what you're...
Yeah, no, I think you've answered a lot of it there. Like I was just going to ask kind of generally just, what does the process look like at ASOS? So
so it's pretty industry standard, I would say. I think from the design diploma that I did with yourselves, and I can vividly have Coleman Walsh's voice in my head talking about like the golden process. and how you're not doing UX if you are not doing research. So I think the design process is definitely that. It's pretty industry standard, but there are things, again, like I said, depending on the work. If it's like a small or large feature, it's all about like triaging the design effort that's needed. But like I said, there's some things that I will never cut corners on, which includes research. I think it's like Coleman said, you're not doing true UX if you're not doing research. So there's that. And like we have a visual graphic of our design process, and it showcases how the different stages are iterative. So if I'm in the discovery cycles stage of things, I might dip into the design side of things and come back when I understand there's more problems to understand and change the designs. And then if I go to testing things, I will have to come back and maybe change designs before they're built. So it's linear by like visually, but there's definitely we showcase how iterative it is. And then that's the design process. And then I think the design process fits nicely into the overall product process, which includes a lot of experimentation. So at ASOS, we launched like a bunch of experiments throughout the year. And that is just so that we can understand how our users will interact with certain features that we build, and then we can learn from that too as well. So that's iterative by nature too. It's not just iterating on like a design and testing, it's also iterating once we've built something and put it out there as an experiment. I hope that kind of helps with that.
No, definitely. And I mean, you're talking to a researcher, so glad to hear that you'd like to keep that one in the process. But yeah, I think from what you're saying, like, is that you kind of have to be flexible and that you can kind of move around the process a little bit. It's not perfectly linear all the time. Great. So I have a couple of questions here coming in from some of the people watching. So do requests come through to your team generally from product? Is it from marketing, or where do you find kind of product requests coming through from?
Yeah, it all depends on what part of the product you're working on. So again, I can mostly speak about checkout. So a lot of things from checkout might come from, like I said earlier, either stuff that we've noticed when doing some research on checkout. So we've been doing a lot of that recently in terms of understanding what are the pain points within checkout, how can we understand them a bit closer. In checkout as well, we also will lean on any like customer care data. So if we have a whole customer care team up the north of the UK, and it's understanding like they're the front lines and people are getting annoyed at them. Maybe at something is like their promo code isn't working or something isn't right at checkout. So it's all about understanding like the frequency and like how much that's happening at checkout. So there's that as well. But if you're working on other parts of the product, you could be working closely with marketing if that is encompasses like personalization of the product. If you're like working on the landing page, like how can you make the landing page of the ASOS as best as it can be? And because the people who power that, where the people who power the landing page, that's not necessarily product people, it's the marketing side of things and the trade marketing side of things. So there's that. If you're working on the product like display page or the listing page, you're going to be working with maybe like studios to understand, okay, they shoot the product. How do they go from getting the models in, shooting the piece of clothing on the model and uploading it onto ASOS? There's definitely like working with them if you wanted to add anything new to the product display pages. So that's how they kind of
I guess it's probably quite company dependent and team dependent. Great to kind of understand how it works for you guys. And I know you mentioned there kind of customer care data, and it sounds like such a rich source of kind of insights because it's real customers really interacting with the product. But there's a question here about kind of what kind of tools you use at ASOS for research and getting feedback. So I know you mentioned that customer care data, but maybe you could talk a little bit about any other sources you use for kind of collating or collecting that feedback.
Cool. So from a qualitative standpoint, So that's talking to customers mainly. We generate a lot of that through usertesting.com. So we have a license with them, and it's the best tool for user research. Well, personally, from what I've used, I think it's because you can launch, like I've set up user testing for tomorrow, and they were snapped up within like a few minutes of me putting them live. So we use user testing to chat to real customers. You can also launch unmoderated sessions on user testing. So that means I'll construct a user test and send it out, and people do it in their own time. I don't have to be on a call with them. So that's really insightful too from a qualitative standpoint. What else qualitative? Like surveys, we use SurveyMonkey. There's also a customer insights team as well, and they also are launching like on product. You might see it sometimes gives us some feedback, but then we also have things like our own ratings and reviews on products. We look at things like Twitter, so we do see people giving out about ASOS on Twitter. We do kind of watch social media. We also have, you can leave feedback within the app as well, and we do see that as well. And then from a quantitative standpoint, so that's looking at more data side of things. Like I said, we have customer care data, but also we have Adobe Analytics, and that's what the insights and analytics team are in charge of, and they kind of help us construct any kind of data or dashboards to do with anything. And we also have Content Square, which is really cool as well. You can see kind of the hotspots or the heat maps on different pages, which is cool. And yeah, see the different journeys people take. So what's the average, like when you get to checkout, where are most people going? Are they actually checking out, or are they going back? And like, why are they going back? So the quant helps you understand like the what. It's the more interviews you do is helping us understand like why. I think that's a pretty common saying.
No, great. I love hearing all these different research methods. Sounds like a really like well-functioning, mature research setup you have. And I saw a question come through on kind of, how do you really define and get to the root of the user problem? But I think from everything you've said there, that seems to all be contributing to that, to really understanding, what's going wrong, what is the problem.
Yeah. There's definitely kind of things you can do which help you get there. Like the data, like I said, will help you understand the what. When it comes to interviewing a user, I think you need to treat those interviews as, sometimes when a participant comes on an interview, they can feel a bit like, oh, there's people watching me. Why are they watching me? What do they want to know about me? So you need to kind of make those sessions, those interviews, as personable as possible, and just make them normal. Like it's just a chat at the end of the day. We want to, it's most conversations are two-way, but we definitely want to hear more from the participant, but it's making them feel comfortable. And I think when you do that as well, they just kind of open up more participants if you were to be very cold as an interviewer. So there's definitely people side of it that I think you need to inform yourselves. And I think as well, something in checkout, which I've learned over the past few months, is we're at like the end of the user journey. So if I was to test today with an interview, in an interview, and throw people straight into checkout, you're not really replicating a true experience. Like if I wanted to test a new payment method or something and just throw them into checkout, that won't work. You need to construct as much as you can that entire journey and scenario. So I'll never do that with user interviews. I'll always bring them onto the ASOS page and just let them kind of talk us through. It's definitely such a challenge trying to mimic a real experience, because, for example, if you are a shopper who you buy mainly for events, like that's really hard to mimic if there's no real event. So that the user has to think about. So it's trying your best to kind of create that scenario as best as you can, and then that's how you'll actually get those true rich insights, I think.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we're coming up to the last 10 minutes, Sean, and thank you so much for everything you've said so far. Has been massively useful and really great to talk to you. So what I'm going to do now is look kind of to more of the questions that are coming through from some of our viewers. So it might jump around a little bit from topic to topic, but I just want to make sure we try and cover some of the ones that have been upvoted by everybody. So I have one here. So how long did you feel it took to get really good at your job, and what challenges did you find in getting there?
What was that last part? Sorry, I missed.
What challenges did you find in getting there? Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I'm there yet. I think you're always improving. I suppose the challenges of making me feel like I was good at my job. I think for me, I think I could learn the craft. I was always kind of good at picking things up and learning things, whether that was through shadowing people or just learning, like I said, I'm shadowing virtually on YouTube and stuff like that. But for me, where I thought I always struggled was presenting my work and talking on a presentation or something like this, like we are today. So I think that's once I started feeling a bit more comfortable with presenting, that's when I kind of felt a bit like, okay, I'm not, this imposter syndrome, yes, I still get it, but I think you'll never not get it. But I think that definitely lessened so more and more as I was more comfortable at presenting my designs. And it's something you're always doing. So I think if you have any opportunity to practice, and might not even be in design, like that fashion student earlier, if you've any chance of presenting, just practice. I don't think I did enough of that in college, not enough in school. So it's definitely the trick, I think is, and again, like I said, yes, it just makes you feel more comfortable. And it just makes you feel a bit more rewarded when you can actually showcase and tell that story, like you were saying earlier. But in terms of like time-wise, I don't think it was until like after like a year or two actually designing, I think that's when I felt a bit like, okay, I can do this. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I know you mentioned imposter syndrome there as well, which was another question that came through, just how to overcome it, which I think it's always a difficult question. It comes up a lot in these webinars, but I think what you said there is really important to be able to tell the story, because, you need stakeholders and other team members to be able to understand the journey you've been on. Was there anything else on imposter syndrome that helps you overcome it, or anything like that? I know it's a difficult question. I don't know if anybody has the answer to it.
Definitely, and everyone has different ways and techniques. And I think one thing, if I was thinking, this design is crap, or I just didn't feel like I was giving it my all or something like that, I think always just getting feedback, and like your managers are there for a reason. It's to coach and nurture you as a designer. Don't feel like you're wasting their time. If you need to pull them aside and be like, look, I don't feel confident in design, they're there to help you and give you feedback. So I think feedback is definitely the biggest, I suppose, tool against imposter syndrome, and make you just feel like, I'm not all that bad. I think that's definitely it, is just seeking out feedback. Another thing I've seen people do, which I don't know, is it a bit cringy, because I think as Irish people, we get a bit, when people give us compliments, we're like, would you stop, you're grand, is just screenshot those bits of feedback you get. I don't do it all the time. But they're definitely rewarding for you to have, and they also really help with like performance reviews and things like that too. If you can showcase how someone personally thought your presentation, your designs, anything was good, and then if you're ever feeling a bit, I don't know what I'm doing, just you have those memories of people giving you good feedback too. So I think feedback, yeah.
Great idea for those moments of kind of second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
Great. So we have a question here that's kind of jumping back more towards the portfolio. So it is, what did you find the most beneficial way to distribute your portfolio when you began to look for roles? And did you find networking to be useful?
Oh, networking is, the biggest thing. And I think it's also like a bit of a dirty word, because it's like you're exchanging something, you're looking for something, so off of someone else. So I think just remember, again, always think about who's the other person at the other end of the screen you're wanting to reach out to. So what I did when trying to get into design, I got my break by sending it to my college lecturer, and then he had sent it on to Work Vivo. But before all that, I was throwing it at the wall. But I was trying to do it in a way that wasn't like a bit more tactical. I put it into like UX groups. There's a UX Cork group that I put it into. I messaged people on LinkedIn, but and try and just ask if there's any open roles at the moment, because sometimes they might not be advertising them. But if there's a company that you would love to work for, definitely try and chat to people on LinkedIn. I think COVID has definitely made people more approachable on LinkedIn, because I think, another thing I'd say about like connecting with people on LinkedIn, don't just send a connect button. Remember, again, think about who's at the other end of the screen. Is like, if they're just seeing that with all the other connection requests, add a personal note, make it personal, and understand why you want to connect with them. And then even if it doesn't work out, that's fine. You still have that connection, and you might ask them in a few years' time, or you have their connection on LinkedIn, and they'll remember you from that kind of personal side of things too. So that's what I would say, really.
Yeah, no, it's good advice. And I guess especially what you said there about sending the message, or thinking about, you are sending these messages to humans. So, remember that. Yeah. So there's a question here about the kinds of projects that should be included in a portfolio to work in the fashion industry. And does it need to be, I guess, specific to fashion or e-commerce?
So as you can see, none of my projects were e-commerce related. But I think because I was applying for a product designer role, I think if you're going for like an associate or product designer role, it definitely helps you don't really need that e-commerce experience. It might be more applicable for like a senior or above role. But in terms of, sorry, my brain, the question, what was in terms of?
Yeah, so I guess do the projects need to be specific to fashion or e-commerce? And I guess, like you're saying, yours weren't.
So no is the short answer. And it's just showcasing how your personal experience might be, how your process, it's all the kind of main ingredients of a good case study. But I think if there's any leeway of a hint and anything to do with that industry, if it's anything applicable, just throw it in, and it might not have been, and I've seen other people on YouTube who have showcased portfolios where their product actually hasn't officially launched or never went to market, but they actually did work on that because it was something to do with, I think, payments, and they were applying to like a payment provider company. So in terms of fashion and e-commerce, it's not really applicable. It's not everything applicable. It's not wholly applicable, but it definitely does help. I think if there's anything you can show your interest in different ways of doing that.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. So a couple of other questions here, and we have exactly 1 minute left. So I'm going to pick one out here at random for you. I guess it goes back to kind of, and I'm interested in it again because of your background in kind of development and that. So would you recommend learning some form of coding language such as Python? Would you say it's needed as a UX designer?
Python, from what I gather, is more like data science. I might be wrong as well. That's showing my my lack of education in that area. I definitely think I don't think it's necessary. I'll say that, but it definitely helps and it gives you an edge. That gave me my edge, I think, is whenever I was in that interview process, I definitely mentioned it a few times how I have worked in the past with HTML, React. So I think the main ones, if you were to apply to an e-commerce company, I think would be if you were able to showcase, the HTML, JavaScript, CSS, or React. I think it also helps from if you wanted to quickly mock something up and just being able to do that within the dev tools. And to do that, you need to understand HTML, or CSS and JavaScript, but at a very basic level. You don't need to know everything. So that definitely helps, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to say the same, because I know I mentioned the course on the software and coding fundamentals, and we cover HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but it's kind of at the level of, you don't need to be able to code, just to know kind of how to communicate with the developer and speak a little bit of their language.
And if you're on a call with them and you open the dev tools, I think that's enough. They'll be impressed by that.
Yeah, there's some willingness to meet them halfway. Okay, well, look, that brings us up to the full hour. Sean, it's been so great to speak with you, and I know everybody viewing has found it really helpful. So thank you so much for your time and for talking to us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I hope everyone walked away with some nugget of information. And again, thanks for inviting me back to the UX Design Institute. It was great to chat to you today.
Of course, yeah, we are delighted to have you back. Thanks again.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.